Continuing with our frame battle series, what I bring to you today is one technique that can really change the tide of a frame battle, and it can make you instantly win if used correctly. And that technique is questions. So how can we use questions to really win a frame battle and make the other side prove themselves, or to make the other side lose power? That's what we're going to cover. So the technique that we're going to cover is pretty much questions in their basic form, or put together in something that I call the diagnostic. And the principle is the following. When you are asking questions of the other side and you are obtaining information, you seem more of a specialist by association. It's literally like a doctor in a consultation. Anytime that they ask a question and you answer, you are losing power because you're giving them information and they are showing expertise. So what you want to do in any interaction is you want to ask questions to obtain information from the other side. This weakens their position and it gets you more information. So this is very useful, for example, if you are a consultant or a salesperson, because what you're doing is you're qualifying the person and getting them to prove themselves by asking them questions. And again, whoever is asking the questions wins. That's in fact my second point, which is that in any interaction, even if you have power and you're asking the questions, if they decide to turn it on you and start asking questions, you can lose that power very quickly. For example, you're the salesperson and you have a list of qualification questions, right? So you ask, hey, what have you tried? How much are you willing to invest? And so on. And the person is answering obediently. But then the person can decide to turn the tide of the conversation and to start asking you questions. So what does your product do? What are you willing to do to close us as a client? What do you provide in terms of this specific problem? And so on. Suddenly, you are now the one proving yourself. And they are the ones that have the power. So that's, again, why the quote, whoever asks the questions wins, is very appropriate. You need to be constantly asking questions from beginning to end and not answering questions in order to retain your power. So another point which is important to raise is, what if you find yourself on the defensive and they start asking you questions? Well, the best way to do it is to either give them a vague answer or to refuse to reply. So for example, you're a service provider and someone immediately asks you, what's your price? They are trying to take away your power. They're trying to reduce you to a number. And if you answer that question honestly, then you're pretty much done. Again, consider the analogy of the doctor with the patient. If I'm a doctor and I ask questions for 40 minutes before prescribing a medication, I seem very specialized. But if I come in and then the patient asks me, what is the medication that you prescribe? And I tell them immediately, I'm going to lose all of my power and I'm going to seem very replaceable. I'm not specialized. The same thing happens here. So if a person comes in and they ask, what is your price? And you reply honestly, you have just been reduced to that price. So you can obfuscate by giving a vague answer by saying, hey, the price depends on what your needs are. So what are your needs? And immediately you just flip this on them. Now they're the ones who have to prove themselves. Or you can literally refuse to reply. You can say, I'm very sorry, but at this stage, I cannot give out a price. Tell me about your needs. So what you're effectively doing is you're not giving them any useful information when they ask a question. It's almost like you're telling them indirectly, it's not worth it to ask for questions because I'm not going to reply, and you're here to reply to my questions and not the opposite. That's the message that you're trying to get across. And it's also important to notice that, especially if the other side has a big ego, this can go on for a while. I've had this type of situation in my past, where I'm asking, hey, what is your need as a client? And the person asks, well, that depends on what your price is as a coach. And I tell them, well, my price depends on the service. What are your needs? And they tell me, well, I'll tell you about my needs after you tell me what your services are. And this can go on for a while. Possibly indefinitely if none of the two sides show weakness. This is why it's important to deflect and to not answer the questions so that they don't get any useful information, and to keep asking them your questions so that you get information. Also, you can be a little bit devious here and you can give them wrong answers to make them trip. I don't recommend doing this, but it is something that you can do. So for example, if you're the prospective client and you know that the service provider is trying to trick you or they're not very trustworthy, you can say something like, well, I'm actually looking for team training for something else that I don't need. And then they tell you, oh yeah, we're very specialized in that. And then you tell them, oh, by the way, I also need this other thing, which is completely different. And they say, oh, very interesting. So you're replying to their questions, but with garbage information. And then in the end, when they pitch something, they're pitching something which is poisoned because it's garbage information. And then they say, oh, we really recommend the service with this team training and this. And then you tell them, well, that's not really what I'm looking for. So that's something that you can do if you really want to, exhibit a persuasion tool tour de force and you want to destroy them with an advanced technique, but I don't recommend doing it because you're just wasting your time and you're not going to get a deal done, right? So usually don't do that. Just refuse to answer or redirect to questions of your own. And finally, it's important to remember before closing that the more information that you obtain, the better. Again, let's go back to the doctor analogy. If I'm a doctor, someone comes in and I immediately prescribe some kind of medication, I'm not serious because I didn't ask enough qualified questions. If I ask 20 questions, for example, that's a lot better. If I ask 40 questions, that's even better. And if I spend a whole hour or 2 hours just asking questions to get to the deep down level of detail that I want, then that prescribed medication is going to seem a lot more specialized. In other words, the more information that you obtain before you pitch something, the more qualified that something that you pitch is going to seem, even if it isn't really specialized. It's a psychological effect. The more information that you have, then the more qualified that something seems, because people guess that you are using all the information that you have. So in other words, the more information that you can obtain before you pitch something, the more qualified that something is going to seem. So keep asking questions and keep getting to a deep level of detail to really win that frame battle and to make the other side prove themselves to you or just to realize your authority and your credentials. So as you see, questions are a very powerful tool in a frame battle. Whoever is asking the questions wins. The more information that you can obtain from the other side, the more power that you have. And realize that they can try and turn the power dynamic and ask you questions. And in those cases, just give them a vague answer or a garbage answer or redirect to a question of your own. So remember this, the more that the frame battle is contested, so the more powerful the two people are, the more that this can go in terms of ping pong for a while, back and forth with questions. But at the end of the day, the person that asks the most questions and the person that obtains the most information wins at the end of the day. If you found the video useful, consider liking and subscribing, and remember to check our channel for more negotiation and persuasion techniques, both for this purpose and for other purposes as well.